Hello, everyone. My name is KJ, and I am the host of Great Talk and Entertainment official channel. In today's video is my spoiler review for season 2 of Marvel's animation X-Men 97, episode 2 spoiler review. So if you have not seen this song, please pause this. Before you go, could you do one thing for me? Could you hit the thumbs up button, aka the like button? That would help my YouTube channel out, and I truly appreciate that. Come back, let me know in the comments below of what you think about of episode 2 of season 2 of X-Men 97 in the comments below. So, again, this is my spoiler review. I'm going to leave y'all with a skit, and then after this skit, I'm going to do a deep dive for episode 2 of X-Men 97. So, with that being said, I hope you guys enjoying this skit, and then we'll talk about episode 2 for X Men 97 season 2. So enjoy that skit. Oh boy. Starting today is going to be a busy week for me. Oh boy. Well, I better start getting to work. Well, let's start with what the. I am the champion. Uh, I'm the champion of the world, baby. Woo! Let's go, Spider Man. Spider Man. Spider Man. Spot. Oh, hey. Um. Oh, what are you doing here? I was, you know, I just need some privacy. Can you go away? Just, just shoot. Okay, I am going to touch some grass now. Going outside, touching all the grass. Yeah. Now, this episode starts off in 1997 with a group of mutants who are running from their life because the X Men are gone in this current timeline. And what's very interesting about these young mutants is these are the Marvel characters from the comic books and Marvel's Uncanny comic book series, Generation X Next Gen, and these are the mutant characters for Marvel that kind of like take the next replacement of the X-Men in future comic books. And if they would do it now in this series, that'd be really cool. But they exist. They actually showed them, which is really cool. And Jubilee would probably and Sunsport are probably around their same age, but maybe just a little bit older by the time they form the next generation of the X-Men group. So there's just a little fun fact to that. But they're running away from this group called the X Factor. And the X Factor in this episode, in this scene, they catch them and say, "Hey guys, don't worry. We're here to protect you." And they're supposedly going to relocate them for safety reasons, but not really, because of the fact that the X Factor is being run by the American government. Now, here's a fun fact that I find very a similar parallel to this series and the live action MCU of Marvel. So what I noticed is if you remember in the movie Captain America Civil War, the Avengers had to they were asked by General Ross to sign the Sokovia Accords, like documents, to say like, we'll tell you what's something worth the Avengers handling versus what's not worth the Avengers handling. So mass destruction and innocent people don't get hurt like they did in the Captain America Civil War movie. Now, this is what it would somewhat look like if all the Avengers agreed to it. And then we see the X Force take place. And, it's not something we learn that they're all agreed to do, but they feel like it's the right thing to do. And this is kind of like the argument in Captain America Civil War. So I think that's really cool that they actually put this scenario that never got to play out in Captain America Civil War because due to the not all the Avengers, including Steve Rogers and Sam Wilson, who are Captain American in their own rightful place in the MCU, of course, but they both were like against it, and the fact that Iron Man was for it, and Natasha, aka Black Widow, was for it. And so we didn't get to see that play out, but in this series in season 2 of X-Men 97, they may not be the Avengers, they may not be familiar X-Men or mutant Marvel characters that the mainstream recognize, but the X-Force is a popular superhero group in the sense of very well known in comic books, or literally following orders from the government, because in a way they didn't say they signed those documents, but it's very similar to it. So I thought that was very interesting, and to see this play out, it doesn't play out very well, but it showcases why, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it's better them to just not be controlled in this sense of what's right and what's wrong, to protect somebody, to protect the world when the world's in danger. And so that's very interesting to see that. But again, because of the fact for this scenario is the X-Men members, the original X-Men members, they are actually not in their current timeline, as we learned from episode 1. So this one would look like if all the Avengers agreed to General Ross's, you know, option, as he would say. The next thing we see is Cable has found Jubilee and Sunspot at a arcade, and we see Cable kind of eating like a milkshake and some pizza or like a hot dog or something like that. And he's trying to convince them to join his team, which he does. He does. They do join his team. And he's explaining them what's going on, and explain who Apocalypse is to Jubilee and Sunspot, and explain his main goal. And then we see what has become, because we have the X Factor, but Cable is the leader of the X Force. Now, if you remember the Deadpool 2 movie, we see Deadpool's the leader of the X Force, and we see him recruit members to join the X Force. And this one, they don't wear like the jerseys, the X Force jerseys that Deadpool and the others wore in Deadpool 2, in the sense of it. But this is a more like serious, because Deadpool 2 was more of a comedy to it, but this is a different take on it, but and of course different members, but this time Cable's in charge of the X Force. So the reason why I want to bring that up is, in a way, it's really cool to see. We saw Deadpool's version of how he would run the X Force, which is great and it's hilarious. But now we're seeing Cable, this version of how he would run the X Force members. And this one's a more serious, and obviously they're trying to stop Apocalypse. So a big difference, big different type of mission, goal, and storyline, of course. But I just love to see the parallel to these two things. And I just feel like in some way, somehow, they'll find a way that we're going to surprise us. Kevin Feige is going to help find a way to connect all this in some sort of way with the live action in the MCU. So that's what I'm kind of hoping, and that's why I'm bringing that up, because in this we see, the X Force team up, and they're getting ready to go to fight, and they got to figure out. So we see in this scene where there's a festival or like a parade, and what they're looking for is they found a war horseman named War, and this is a different War, but he's like in the crowd, and Jubilee sees him, and they're trying to follow him, and they eventually capture this guy who I believe it's his name is Kereson, Kirson. I don't know how to pronounce it, but they call him War. But again, like I said in the episode one spoiler review, is that the name War is just a title given to by Apocalypse, that you're a higher elite, that he can entrust you to do his mission, or help complete his mission, his goal. So this mutant, again, is very well skilled, very a huge threat that can be very challenging for any X-Men members or good guy or hero to take if they're trying to stop Apocalypse. So this guy is a very serious person to take very serious, obviously, but you know, if he wanted to, he could have defeated them, but luckily, the X Force all planned it out the way they needed to capture this guy. And it was very challenging, but we see they capture and tie him up. Now, this is where it gets very interesting, because in this episode, between Jubilee and Cable, Jubilee obviously is going to go the same route Charles Xavier would do, handle things. Cable is kind of acting like Magneto in the sense of ruthlessness. Like, so what happened was, after they tie him up against like this palm tree, Cable had Psylocke, who she has the ability, kind of like Charles Xavier's and Jean's Greg, where she can read people's minds. And with Charles Xavier and like Jean Greg, they always taught like someone like Jubilee that there's a kinder way to do this, where we're not disrespecting them, or this is kind of like asking for consent, but she didn't. She just forced herself into his this guy's personal memories, in which the message is everybody. Charles Xavier always believes, just because he can get in your mind and read everything you've said, or get information from what you remember, he respects your privacy, he respects your secrets, even though he may need them for the sake of the world. But Charles Xavier wouldn't do that. But she just said, nah, screw that. And that's not very settling with Jubilee, because it's kind of unhumane, and it's not right, and it does hurt that individual. Once somebody like a mutant like her or Charles Xavier to Jean Grey, it can physically and mentally break you, by forcing a memory to show up, because you're controlling their neuro brain electric stuff. So it's very important to just be kind about it. But Jubilee was just unsettling. And then the fact that after they got the information, Cable had Archangel just shoot him to death. One shot and died, right? And Jubilee, again, she is one of those mutants, X-Men members, or you can say superheroes who follows the hero code. You never kill. But they don't. They kind of like Deadpool, Punisher, you know, I don't know, anybody anti-hero basically, vigilante type stuff, they would pull the trigger. But Jubilee didn't sit well, and her and Cable throughout this whole episode are butting heads because they want to handle things a little differently, and Jubilee thinks the way she can do it is better because what she was like, trying to explain is you didn't have to do that to him. You could have got more out of him because when they were trying to get in his memories, there was a frozen crystal, and Jubilee brought up the fact that this was the cause of Emma Frost, who in comic books and in the old X-Men animation series had a love interest with Cyclops. So Scott Summer. So I'm just saying she knew that Emma Frost is somebody who knows the answer, but you can't trust her because, you know, in her, there's some history. There's a love triangle. There's some her feelings has been hurt, and that obviously carries on in this new version, this new series of X-Men 97. So that's still carrying on in this series. So Jubilee knows trusting Emma Frost is not something you should do. So we see that. And so as they're getting ready to visit her, and they asked her, and she knows the answer. I think she has it on a disc. And, they're talking, but she wants something. There's a price to pay. Is it money? Was it information? I thought Emma Frost wanted some of Apocalypse's technology. But what happened was, as soon as they go to this location, it's all an ambush. Emma Frost set this up because she was helping. She's double agenting. She didn't. She double agents all the time. This is a character who does that. But she was trying to. She made a deal with X Force, which that means she made a deal with the government to get something out of it. And they ambushed, the X Force, or not the X Force, X Factor. I apologize. X Factor ambushed X Force because they made a deal with Emma Frost. Now, let's talk about who's in the members of the X Factor. So we have Polaris. Now, Polaris is the daughter of Magneto. I don't know who her mother is. I did not research that. Then we have Havoc, who is the brother, and I believe little brother of Cyclops. Now, they didn't know they were brothers until they realized like their abilities cannot harm them. And I can't remember exactly if they obviously it I believe they know they are brothers in this, but I don't think he knows. They may or may not know, but I do recall in the X-Men animation, not the 97, but the one that came out in the 90s or early 2000, I think they did do an episode where Havoc and Cyclops did find out they are actually brothers. But if they're not, that's fine. But in comic books, these two are brothers. And I believe Havoc is the little brother of Cyclops. That's what I'm thinking. If not, I'm wrong. Let me know in the comments below. But he's in this group. And then there's Multi Man, Wolfbane, and Strong Guy. Now, Wolfbane, she's she was in the live action New Mutants, and so that's one way we've seen her. And I do believe that Wolfbane character was in the old school X-Men animation. Could have been. I think I would believe X-Men Evolution animation series. That's where I believe I remember seeing that mutant character, and obviously in the comics. But Wolfbane, she's in it. Strong guy. He's well, not well known, but I remember him from the old school X Men cartoon series as well. So they're the members, and a lot of them the X Force escape, except Havoc caught Jubilee and capture her. But Cable said we'll come back and get her later, and Sunspot's pissed about the whole thing, but he Cable reinsures him that they did and I don't know why they didn't add this in this episode, but Jubilee and Sunspot were trained. They did combat training, and I just thought that's crazy because I don't know why they must have cut it out for the length of this episode. But that's crazy they cut that out. I thought they could have done a quick show of them just training. But I think the whole point was just, again, like I said in my last spoiler review, is this is a lot of tug and pull. They're giving you enough, but then at the same time, they're trying to speed everything up, but speed it up with a lot of action. Because there's a lot of cool action fighting scenes in this too, as well. But that's just them trying to give you much of this and then give you a bunch of action scenes where they're fighting or shooting at each other, a lot of big explosions. So that's the kind of thing this episode is. They're trying to give you to understand the plot of the whole season 2, and then they're also trying to give you as much of X-Men fighting action explosions. So there's a lot of that tug and pull with it. And that's just a pure example of like they must have had to cut that out because they did mention that Jubilee was trained by Psylocke taught Jubilee how to do an armbar, but which that's really, as we see in this episode, which that's really cool, but kind of strange that they're trying to modernize like their combat styles with like mixed martial art, which it's probably the normal thing now at this point. But again, the X Factor has captured Jubilee, and when we get to that, they're on a floating ship in Washington D.C. and we see Jubilee getting antagonized by Polaris and Havoc, and they're asking like where they're at, why are you doing this, stop doing this, and they do the good cop bad cop. But my favorite part was Jubilee told Havoc like you're just a knockoff version of Cyclops, and again, I'm not sure if these two, if Havoc and Cyclops right now in this show know. Again, I don't know if they know that they're brothers, but it looked like that comment must have sting because he got pissed off, and Polaris kind of saw that, and she's like, "Hey, can you give us a minute?" And he's like, "I'll give you 2 minutes." And this is the part where Jubilee got through Polarized and saying, how can you live with this? How can you be settled with this? Because we're seeing that all those people that the X Factor came and saved to protect and put them in a safe place is pretty much jail. And they're scared. And we're seeing familiar mutants from the past cartoon shows and new ones that they haven't yet shown in historically on in cartoon series or in live action, but we're seeing that, and this is where the fun picks up. This is where you get to see Jubilee show off her mutant power skills, but Polarice helps her escape and cuts off the cameras and stuff, and this is where we see Jubilee go to work. The song Volcano Girl by Veruca Salt is played during when Jubilee puts on her headphones and plays the music and her glasses. And this is where she frees everybody and she fights off uh, the military police type stuff and just takes them on. What's really cool is Jubilee does this thing where they kind of grab her and she puts her feet on the wall and her powers go through her feet and help her escape. And it's an all battle, but she gets everybody out and it forces Cable to get people on his ship. And luckily, they all escape. And just as they're getting ready, Jubilee jumps off the flying ship, and Sunspot catches her before she falls to the ground. But all fun action, very emotional, very heroic, and Polarized is like, I don't know what happened. I wasn't even there. But really fun to watch stuff, and I love that scene because it shows Jubilee his abilities and skills, and it shows that she shows leadership, and that she'd probably be the character that Marvel in general wants to make the leader of the group at some point in the future and future projects basically. And which I'm down for that because I think Jubilee is a well-known loved character and I feel like historically yes they have used this character a lot in the cartoons and live action of course, but I feel like they really haven't they barely scratched the surface with Jubilee as a character. And I just very excited to see that and to see her do this. I think people are going to really enjoy Jubilee as a fan, just become more of a fan of her. And I think this episode, this scene of that action scene really did well and set the tone of who she is and why you should be a fan of her, in my opinion. And what's interesting too is the people that they shown that was locked up that Jubilee helped free in the old school cartoon show, the X-Men. These were the same mutants that were helping Cable defeat Apocalypse in the future. So there they are again, and it's kind of like a reboot of a retold story from that show, but being retold again in 3 episodes so far. And to see those characters who end up becoming part of Cable's group team in the future to take down Apocalypse, to see them get saved by Jubilee and taken in by Cable is really cool. So it's like a full circle moment of it. So I thought that was really cool too. And, very tough, very emotional. But other than that, like this thing, we're seeing it, and all fun stuff with that. So, but when we get closer to the end of this episode, we go back to a young child version of Cable, aka Nathan, where he again has to make that tough decision of letting his parents go back to their timeline, the current timeline that Jubilee and Sunspot is at. Because that timeline of that universe 100% needs the X-Men right now. So very emotional, but it also shows you why Cable is the way Cable is now, and it shows you the why what he's gone through so much emotionally, mentally, and physically, obviously. So to retell about the story of Cable in this, I think is really awesome, and I think episode 2 really is to me like the buffer between episode 1 and episode 3 really smooths everything out. Like if you didn't understand this now, and which you should, you're definitely going to really appreciate episode 3 and understand why Cable is the way he is. So I thought that was really told well. And again, a whole episode just for Jubilee 2 was awesome, and I hope there's more of that. So really good. Now, if I had to give this episode a 1 out of 10. I'm going to definitely give this an 8. What I liked about this is they were showing like why the X-Men need to be there, why the world needs the X-Men, why the mutants themselves depend on them a lot because they're really fighting for their human rights, their civil rights. And two, I also just again I loved about them just retelling Cable who he is and his background. I thought it was really well. And again, I like the fact that they're taking old stories from the older X-Men cartoon and retelling them in this series, X-Men 97. So I thought that was really good. And the final thing that I like was just the fun stuff that we seen when Jubilee got to show off her ability. So really good. Only thing I didn't like again is it's a lot of pull and tug. They give you so much, but then they're trying to put more, trying to cram other things in there, with mostly the action. But other than that, really good. So that is my spoiler review, all. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, Great Talking Entertainment Official Channel. Subscribe, hit that notification button so you can always be updated with all my latest content. Thank you guys, and peace